I played Dispatch, and it was a mixed bag. I'll say that. I've never been that much of a fan of the choose-your-own-adventure genre, as although in concept the premise is very interesting, when put into practice the choose-your-own-adventure style narrative these games adopt is more of a gimmick at best. But even with the main premise of these games being almost redundant, this still hasn't stopped studios, most notably Telltale, from dominating the market with these types of games, amassing an almost cult-like fan base of dedicated players to content creators, analyzing every aspect of their products, pumping out God only knows how many videos breaking down all their characters, and although there is no shortage of these games that you can find within the deep dark corners of Steam. The genre would take a massive hit in prestige and audience retention when the game's main monopoly holder, Telltale, would unfortunately be put out of action due to the company's ongoing financial troubles in late 2016, closing down in 2018, and being revived by Skybound Entertainment in the following year. And although the studio still plans to release new titles, most anticipated being The Wolf Among Us 2, and have released new titles such as The Expanse, that came out to some mixed reviews, we'll just say. They are in no way the juggernaut they used to be, losing all hegemony over the genre. Ironically, at the same time, the majority of their previous competition would be facing their own personal stagnation. Though during the small period between 2018 to 2019, when Telltale was on the downturn and had let go of countless employees, some integral to the creation of some of their most respected titles came ad hoc, created by said former employees of at the time the defunct Telltale, wanting to carry on the legacy of their former employer, using the same genre they've been a part of and specialized in for so long. And even though they hadn't made anything since the studio's creation, given its game development and all that, they would eventually announce back in 2024 at the Game Awards that they'd be releasing their first original game, Dispatch, in 2025. Okay, now that I'm done reading the Wikipedia page, let's talk about this game, if you can even call it that. The story has you play as Robert, an aging superhero known as Mecha Man, searching for your father's killer, a gang leader named Shroud, and after tracking him down to a warehouse and fighting his henchmen, you're just about barely able to make it out of the confrontation alive, using your mecha suit's remaining power to fly your way out of there. But just when you think you're in the clear, a bomb strapped to the back of your mecha suit explodes, sending you tumbling to earth, destroying your mecha suit and leaving you seriously injured. But worst of all, the loss of the astral pulse, the source of your mecha suit's power, the very thing that allows you to fight villains well above your weight class, and without it aren't even able to take down third-rate thugs. With your career as a superhero basically being over, you announce your retirement on live television, officially letting the world know that your days as Mecha Man are over. But later, seeing a group of thieves looting a store, Robert just can't let go of the heroics and confronts the thieves, but without his mecha suit and his injuries is quickly overpowered, but is saved by Blonde Blazer, a fellow superhero who helps him up and fixes his injuries. After introducing herself, she invites us for a drink, and before you know it, they're hitting it off at a bar. Things are going well when you're confronted by Flambe, a pyrokinetic, and one of Robert's former foes, now a superhero, taking issue with us being in a bar meant for heroes only, threatening Robert with violence if he doesn't leave, which is fair given Robert is retired. But before Flambe can make the first move, Robert throws a glass of alcohol on him, ending the fight, although Robert does get kicked out of the bar anyway. Blazer meets him outside and takes him to the billboard parallel to the Hollywood sign, where the two talk for a bit, with Robert opening up about his personal life, and specifically his family lineage of taking on the mantle of Mecha Man, him being the latest to hold this title, and coming to terms with his now bleak future, now that he won't be able to be a hero anymore. His earnestness in the moment must have done something, as not long after that the two start kissing. But before anything interesting can happen, Blazer pulls away, claiming our little kiss to be unprofessional, as she's not here to be your base Aryan trad waifu love interest yet, but is here to propose a proposition, one that could see Robert become Mecha Man again, on the condition he agrees to be a dispatch correspondent for the Z-Team, a team mostly comprised of rehabilitated villains, at the hero agency SDN, and after a short tutorial he accepts, and we cut to the next day with him in the SDN waiting lobby, where he meets Waterboy, who isn't a hero but is looking for a job as a janitor. We meet up with Blazer, who arrives in the lobby to take us up to be briefed in the Z-Team meeting room, and tells us to get into our new SDN uniform, as she doesn't want anyone on the Z-Team to find out about our previous occupation, given the bad reaction that title could spur amongst the more recent members. He just about halfway changes into his new clothes when we get introduced to Invisigirl, one of the said rehabilitated villains of the Z-Team, who with her ability to go invisible was spying on us, and is the first to find out about Robert's secret identity, but is commanded to keep it a secret as to not cause discord amongst the rest of the team. After that we leave the room, but before we check into our first shift, we're introduced to some more characters, one of them being Royd, the scientist responsible for repairing Robert's mecha suit. suit, and Chase, a former hero like Robert, and a good friend of him and his father's, and in their younger years acted as a form of mentor figure, so they're pretty close, with him actually being the one that recommended Robert to Blazer in the first place, most likely feeling bad for the guy, after seeing his not so glamorous exit from the superhero scene. Now that you've met everyone, you get briefed on all the members of the Z team, and check into your first shift. I won't be explaining the gameplay in depth here, as I do want to get the story out of the way first, but there are moments in the story where during the gameplay, when choosing a hero to dispatch, the game will automatically pre-assign certain members to certain emergencies, which are mandatory that you send them in order to progress the story, which is fine, I guess. Kinda takes the decision out of a decision-based game, but whatever.
With one of the first of these mandatory dispatches requiring you to send Invisigirl to deal with an armed robbery.
Which, due to her ignoring your orders and just being plain difficult, fudges the whole thing up, causing thousands of dollars in property damage and almost killing the client, which Robert articulates and deservedly scolds her for, causing her to assault Robert and storms out of the room like a petulant child.
We then cut to Robert and Blazer's office, where they go over today's team performance.
With Blazer in jubilation at how amazing our first shift went. Yeah, sure. Robert responding on how the standards need to be raised, on account of the lack of discipline on the team's part, with for some reason him taking the brunt of the blame for the Z team's deficiencies. And it is true that if you take the position as a leader, you do bear the brunt of the success and the failure of the people you govern. But how can you succeed when the people under you openly disobey orders? Again, this guy is just way too patient. Yeah, if this was me, I would have fucking, shot this guy. It doesn't matter as we move on to the next scene, where we find Waterboy cleaning up our cubicle after Invisigirl wrecked it by dumping donuts all over our desktop. We call it a day, with Robert leaving with blonde Blazer. Blazer clarifying that his performance when conducting missions with the Z team has in no way any bearing on whether or not his suit gets fixed, which is confusing on why she'd even hire him in the first place, when he has almost zero incentive to actually work. Like, imagine telling someone they got a job at like a oil rig or something, where they had to maintain the conditions of the facility and all that, but then tell them that it doesn't matter how good they are at their job, and that they still get paid regardless. Yeah, sure, let's see how well that goes. This conversation is cut short when Phenomenon, this world's version of Omni-Man, flies over to talk to blonde Blazer. As it turns out, the two are an item, him being here to take her on a date, and to the despair of players everywhere. Although a day he does invite us to come along to, although I decided no. After a little talking where Robert gets thoroughly little broed, the two whisk away to their dream destination, leaving Robert all alone and sad. Damn. If I was him, I'd probably, kill myself. And there goes episode 1 through 2. Episode 3 opens up with Robert and Royd moving all the Mecha Man equipment to SDN so that Royd can start making repairs to the suit as part of Robert and Blazer's deal. Robert urging him to be more delicate when moving the parts. During their conversation, Royd does bring up the complications of recreating the Astropulse, which he asks Robert for any information on, but Robert says he doesn't know either, as the Astropulse was one of the only things his father didn't create schematics for. Robert makes it to the office bringing his dog with him, not wanting to leave the little guy home alone while he's at work, and asks Chase if he could look after it, which Chase happily obliges. Shortly after that, you're called into Blazer's office, where she explains yesterday and your thorough cucking as a not what it looks like type of situation, telling Robert the reason why she didn't want him to come to that date was because she was breaking up with Phenomenon, her reasoning being that she wanted to shake things up. Okay. To be fair, they do expand upon her reasoning for leaving Phenomenon in the side comics that they released after all the episodes coming out, as extra content to expand upon the universe, but I'm not really counting that, as I have to look at external media to understand her motivations, so without them, which I didn't have at the time, this decision just makes her seem like a massive whore. Like, seriously, the kissing behind her boyfriend's back, the eye fucking, all the cutesy wholesome moments, like, bruh. But with her new shake things up attitude, she plans to cut a member of the team, that being the lowest performer, and wants Robert to help her do so. He agrees and we start our shift, and just like yesterday, we're forced into another story moment where the team go out of their way to sabotage each other. One of these attempts by Invisigirl leading to the same villain from yesterday getting away. Again, seeing this, an emergency meeting is called, where the lack of synergy between the members of the team are on full display, some more than others, and Robert gives a rousing speech in order to boost morale, and informs them of their fragile place on his team, and that they're looking to cut someone from SDN, and that it could be any one of them. With that reality check, the shift progresses better. Not great, but better, and we're given another story moment where Robert and Invisigirl have a heart-to-heart, and after a pep talk from Robert, Invisigirl gets to prove herself after her 2 blunders, finally apprehending the villain she let get away twice, giving a much-needed morale boost to the team. We even get a little moment between the two, where she thanks us for helping her, and so closes out episode 3. Episode 4 opens up. What the fuck?
No! Say you swear to fucking God, bro.
Okay, so it turns out after our little pep talk and minor moment, it would seem Invisigo has developed feelings for good old Robert. And that kind of sums up this episode, where we're just thrown love interest after love interest, fan service after fan service, with not much else. At least nothing that's actually important, but I'll get to that. Episode 5 opens up with a flashback and montage of Robert training and fighting a villain, back when he was still an active hero. This flashback cuts in and out of the episode in parts, where the villain is slowly revealed to be Flambe. I could go through the whole episode, but it's not very interesting, like, at all. All it is after your shift, you're invited to a villain bar by the Z team, where you're all bonding and getting to know each other, where after some shit talking, you all get into a bar fight, where after you're given the option to either tell everyone your secret identity or not, where if you choose yes to tell them, Flambe tries to kill you, and if not, you know, nothing happens. That's really it. It's kind of boring. Episode 6 begins with you, Royd, and Invisigo testing the mecha suit with a new Astropulse, and we find Robert in a hospital. We find hospital and Robert, where Royd tells us he can't recreate the Astropulse, and that the project is a failure. You do your shift, but Robert's all sad because you'll never be Mecha Man again, and you go home to be depressed and reminisce. But the team surprise visit Robert, and bring an update to the location of the Astropulse, in that it wasn't actually destroyed, but recovered and passed around to different buyers, all trying to unlock its power and receiving the same result we did, with the group now trying to find its current location. They eventually track it down, but the location is heavily guarded, splitting the group, with one side led by Invisigo, who wants to make a move now, before Shroud can figure out the location, as well as Blazer protesting against this, believing an operation to retrieve the Astropulse would result in major casualties. You're given a choice, but regardless of whatever option you pick, it really doesn't matter. But in amongst the in-group prattling, a fight breaks out between Chase and Invisigo, with Invisigo punching Chase and storming out of the party, with her later going on her own to retrieve the Astropulse, but gets intercepted by Shroud, who uses some form of gas to incapacitate Invisigo, causing her asthma to act up and disrupt her breathing. Shroud takes the Astropulse, completely disinterested in actually killing Invisigo. She's just about to kick the bucket when Chase sacrifices himself to save her. The next time we see him, he's in a hospital in recovery. You can't mourn for too long as you still have a shift to complete, and after giving a rousing speech to the team, you complete your shift. But even with your attempt to mend the team's relationship, it isn't enough, as the rest of the members host an emergency meeting, demanding that Invisigo be thrown off the team for disobedience and defiance against a direct order. Again, you're given the choice to kick her off the team or not, which, regardless of what your choice is, results in her leaving voluntarily, storming out of the meeting room as she was secretly listening the whole time. Robert finds her in the locker room preparing to leave SDN, wanting to reconcile her with the team and move on, but it doesn't work as she's already made up her mind. But before she leaves, she confesses that she was the one that strapped the bomb to our suit and caused us to lose the Astropulse, ending our career as a hero, explaining the deal she struck up with Shroud, a cooperation in exchange for an augmentation that would fix her severe asthma. With this massive revelation, you're given the choice to rightfully so completely disavow Invisigo and demand that she leave SDN. Why we don't detain and question her on the whereabouts of Shroud, the guy who's already tried to kill you and now has the Astropulse, is beyond retarded. She leaves, but not without making a move on us, which you're given the option to either reciprocate or push her away, which I did because why the fuck wouldn't I? She leaves, and in your sorrow you find yourself back at the villain bar, where Robert is confronted by Shroud, who's just sitting there, okay? You get knocked out and wake up upside down being tortured for the information on the Astropulse, which is a surprise as the last time you saw him, he was walking away with the thing. But he then reveals to us that Invisigo did a switcheroo and took the Astropulse for herself. Robert pleads that he doesn't know where it is and is set to meet a fate worse than death, when all of a sudden Blonde Blazer arrives, threatening to kill everyone if they refuse to let Robert go. They do out of fear, and Blazer frees and escorts us to safety. Although we're thrown back into the fray as the city is soon engulfed in turmoil due to Shroud making his move to get the Astropulse, and we're thrown back into the cubicle to dispatch the limited heroes that we have available. This shift is more or less the same. Send hero here, send hero there, but regardless of your efforts, it's all for naught as our forces are overrun and the city's power grid is shut down, taking down SDN's backup generator in the process. We make our way to the infirmary to see if Chase's life support is still running. It is, and we leave him in the hands of the dog to get into our mech suit, where we find Invisigo already there and has been caught trying to get into fix. Honestly, it's never really explained what she's even doing here, and why, if she had the Astropulse, didn't immediately give it back to Robert or Royd, or just fulfill her end of the deal with Shroud and give it to him for the augmentation. Honestly, who cares? She pleads to be released so that she can help Robert and explain herself, which for some reason she doesn't do immediately upon getting caught, or beforehand when she supposedly had the Astropulse, is never explained, though their conversation is cut short when the building is broken into by Shroud's goons, leaving Robert to fend for himself, as Royd had already left to retrieve retrieve the mecha suit that he had moved to a different location prior. A trio of Shroud's goons are seen making their way to the lab, with Invisigo pleading with Robert to release her, which is up to you on whether or not you want to release her, or not, although she escapes anyway. And we're forced into a really unfunny Marvel-esque scene, where we have to kill this random henchman taking a piss. It's really cringe and embarrassing that someone runs, but regardless, you finally make it to your mecha suit, and gear up just in time to save Roy. It seems like it's about to go down when the big man himself, Shroud, shows up to handle beating us personally. One fight scene later, we win, but are forced into a stalemate as Shroud holds our beloved dog hostage, forcing us to make a choice between giving him the Astropulse or him killing our dog. I chose to just give him the Astropulse, the real one, with this choice not really meaning much. Kind of. I'll explain later. But upon giving him the Astropulse, he inserts it into his head and charges up on his newfound power. But oh no, he goes back on his word and tries to kill us. But Invisigo arrives just in time to stop him, and after handing us back the Astropulse, disappears. There are multiple endings, but that's the one I got, where she disappears and we cut to the early morning, where the SDN personnel are clearing up and the team are celebrating. You can, if you played your cards right, end up with Blonde Blazer as a love interest. But it seems my hand wasn't as good as I thought it was, getting me this ending.
It's over.
And roll credits. As I said, I'm not that much of a fan of the choose your own adventure, decision-based game genre, as I just don't see the point in playing a game in which the main premise is void. The moment you try to play the game beyond the limitations the developers put there in place to keep you, the player, from going off the beaten path, it's boring. With the only reason it seems anyone even plays these games today. To me, it's simply for the prestige. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've seen videos titled "Playing Walking Dead for the first time," plastered on my homepage by some hyphen American gaming channel with less than 10k subs. Yeah, sure buddy. And she definitely hasn't done this with anyone else. You're her first time. Trust, like, who are you fooling, bro? Tangent aside, it was a genuine worry of mine that the game alongside the rest of Telltale's works, that my decisions wouldn't matter. And I was half right. The game does the whole "this character remember that" gimmick, ripped straight from The Walking Dead. A feature which has no real bearing on the story beyond a couple characters, them being Blonde Blazer, Invisigo, Coop, and Sonar. Two characters of which are in some moments of the game mandatory love interests that the player must choose between. And the other two being, again, mandatory choices that the player must choose between, with those choices not even having any impact on the story, as regardless of who you pick, the game plays out almost exactly the same. But we'll get into that. But all you need to know is that the decisions don't really change the character's relationship with you, aside from the exceptions I've already stated. The gameplay is also pointless. The developers implemented QuickTime events, some of these QTEs even taking place in pivotal story moments, but again, none of them matter, as the sequence will play out all the same regardless of how well you perform. Like with the climactic end battle with Shroud, it doesn't matter how many button prompts you get correct, you'll just miss every shot regardless. These QTEs are so pointless, the developers even give you the option to turn them off from the very beginning of the game for a more cinematic experience, which I don't see the point in, as without them you're effectively just watching a movie, with ever so slight gameplay elements spiced in between, with those elements also being completely optional, and again having no bearing on the story, which is somewhat strange. As for how little conventional gameplay that could be found in Telltale's earlier works, there was undoubtedly a clear connection between the gameplay loop and the effects it had on the story. Not in the stuff that mattered, obviously, as the fact that none of the decisions meant anything in those games is one of the reasons why the studio went defunct in the first place. But those games at the very least gave in some part an incentive to actually engage with the gameplay. It wasn't high art by any means, but replaying those games for this video, there were constant sections where the developers would force you to actually take part in the story. But unlike in Dispatch, those games were point and click, and you could walk around the environment, where often you were asking NPCs for information, cluing into their dialogue to piece together a mystery, like from season 1 of The Walking Dead, when we were all stuck at the motel after escaping the farm and everyone was exhausted and on edge and nobody could even trust each other, and you had to find out who was stealing the medicine from the group's medicine supply, teaming up with Duck, talking to Clementine and the rest of the group, finding the used chalk, the broken flashlight, eventually finding the supply drop of drugs, and reporting back to Lily, and she's about to go full Warden on everyone, as the bandits hold the group hostage, and you have to fend them off using some of the most atrocious shooting mechanics ever known to man.
Wow! How'd I get shot? But this don't feel weird.
But eventually everyone escapes, and Lily's interrogating the group on the side of the road. Ben's freaking out, and then Carly steps in to defend him, talking mad shit while she does.
Just get back in
That's
the
not
RV.
happening. You think you're some tough bitch, don't you? Like nothing can hurt you. But you're just a scared little girl. Get the fuck over it. Take a page from Lee's book and try helping somebody for once.
It cuts back to Kenny unpinning the walker from under the van, and Lily slowly reaches for a pistol, and, well, you know what happens. And the player's devastated, just for it to be revealed later that Ben was guilty the whole time. It was so good, man. Where in any part of Dispatch does the gameplay become an integral part of the story? Or in Season 2, where Clementine has to find a way out of the shed, and make her way under the house, sneaking in through the hatch, where you're darting through the hallways, and hiding behind the shower curtain, desperately trying to find a disinfectant and thread to fix your arm. It wasn't amazing or even novel, and there's not really that much replay value in these games, but it is leagues and bounds ahead of Dispatch in comparison, as alongside this game's so-called choices, the more conventional gameplay is boring. All it consists of is doing your shift of allocating heroes to the right jobs, playing a couple hacking mini games here and there. Maybe the game might throw you a curveball where you have to answer a trivia question, but after multiple playthroughs of this game, not only are these mechanics boring, but aren't even necessary, as you can fail as many QuickTime events, dispatches, questionnaires as you want, and you're given zero penalty for your poor performance, which I guess makes sense, as Blazer did confirm that our performance had zero bearing on our agreement, so at least it's low accurate, but it does lead to some continuity errors, where the lack of this game's fail screens, which were found in previous Telltale games, results in some ludonarrative dissonance. For instance, in episode 5, where Robert and the rest of the team all head to the bar after their shift to celebrate their recent team success. This scene clearly exists to show the newfound camaraderie you've developed between Robert and the team, and this is where I'm gonna have to talk on the characters a bit, in that the game tries to have the Guardians of the Galaxy dynamic, where a group of people from all walks of life with various backstories all come together to form a plucky, somewhat dysfunctional team, and yeah, it just doesn't work, as you kind of need your characters to be likable, and for their writing to be, you know, good, but unfortunately this game lacks both, as not only are these characters some of the most insufferable cunts on the planet, but due to the fact this game was unfortunately written by fat, disgusting 30-year-old men, we have served up some of the worst dialogue you will ever hear. Honestly, watch any segment of this game on YouTube, just have it play in the background, and you will just hear all the deranged, stupid shit these characters have to say. And this Guardians of the Galaxy found family shtick just doesn't work either, because the Z-Team don't grow as characters. They were arseholes from the beginning, they were arseholes in the middle, and they were slightly less arseholes by the end of the game, and it makes the ending where they're all celebrating after beating Shroud just feel so fake. From start to finish, the team make fun of Robert, belittle him, and openly disobey his orders with impunity. The Invisigirl literally assaults him, and she just doesn't get suspended for insubordination. Flambe threatens to kill Robert more than twice in this game, and depending on if you choose to reveal your secret identity, punches Robert during their house party. How am I supposed to like these people again? But the forced camaraderie in these scenes is even more nonsensical, as due to the lack of fail screens and penalties for your poor performance. During the story, you can just sit there during your shift doing absolutely nothing and still receive the same cutscenes, where everyone is celebrating our improved cooperation, even though we've probably let like, what, 5 9/11s happen in the span of just one afternoon, due to us just sitting there. So you gotta think, the entire team is celebrating the fact that we let hundreds, if not thousands of people die, and there's so many instances of this in the game, where the characters don't react in accordance to the actual happenings in the story, and it doesn't help that Robert is one of the most bland, nothing main characters to ever grace the screen. It's one thing to have a semi to completely silent protagonist so that the player can insert themselves into the role, but it's another thing to have this guy as your main character who just walked from scene to scene with no urgency of his own. The story tells us that Robert is heavily invested in hunting down Shroud, but then spends 99% of the game just sitting there doing nothing. The writers heavily imply that Robert is a hard-working, no-nonsense guy who demands strict and rigid discipline from his subordinates, given the nature of his job that balances literal life and death situations, but is a constantly spineless person, almost laissez-faire when it comes to the job he claims to care so much about. Some scenes try to make Robert out to be an altruistic man who cares for the weak and defenseless, but in times of most imminent crisis would rather take part in a Marvel humor-esque styled bit than do his job. Even his problems just fix themselves. He can't fix his own suit, and just out of nowhere someone comes to offer him the best deal known to man in exchange for fixing his suit. He loses the Astropulse and is believed to be lost forever. And would you look at that, after a single evening now knows the exact location of it. He hasn't been able to find Shroud since the start of the game, which in-game time is 3 months, by the way. And oh my god, look, the antagonist is just sitting there in a bar at the exact time you just so happen to be there. Oh look, the writers were even nice enough to give you 2 love interests, both infatuated with you, almost immediately of you meeting them, by no effort of your own. And this is the whole game, by the way. Things just happen to Robert. He never has the agency to get anything done himself, at least with the things that count. And I don't want to always make comparisons, but the point-and-click gameplay from the Telltale games made it so that you had to experiment and engage with the story, making it almost impossible for the characters to remain static. They were constantly evolving, because you, the player, had a direct impact on the narrative. For however shallow the choices were, you, the main character, had urgency, something that those games were were built around, and something sorely lacking in Dispatch. I did have an entire segment written out on discussing Invisigirl's character to understand why people have such an affinity for this demon, but given that this video is long enough, I guess I can just speed through it. But honestly, it's not hard to understand people's liking for this game. Given the features that appeal to a certain internet tribe, men nowadays are so lonely and decrepit that they will literally herald the bare minimum human interaction from the most normal looking woman as some divine act of God. So it's no surprise why most will see the self-obsessed, selfish, confrontational, aggressive, greedy, gluttonous, lazy and abusive walking train wreck as their literal soulmate. So on that note, I'll take her. I would get into why this game isn't a return to form so many are making it out to be, constantly praising its writing and characters. But given that this game won the most outstanding story-rich game at the Game Awards, basically reduces all my criticisms to dust, because it shows that regardless of the quality, the masses will always be ready to accept the literal bare minimum dog shit. Case in point, it doesn't matter. But yeah, that's the end of the video. I'd like to say that this is just something to tide you guys over for the next month while I make the real big video, but no, this is it.
Look at you. You're so fucking stupid. Look at you, old Ronald McDonald looking ass. Can I get a number 2, please? Motherfucker.
No wonder this channel's dying. Well, that's about it. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and see ya.
Can you believe it, guys? Christmas. Just a week away. Christmas is in a week. Woohoo! I am so happy about this information.